Welcome to Speaking Without Censorship.
Hello everyone, my name is Brittany Espinoza. I am the host for Speaking Without Censorship, SWC for short. Born and raised in Brooklyn, resident with Latino roots, serving the community since 2013 and still active. Just at 11, I have lowered the age for PB, participatory budgeting, along with other achievements. I am now 16, now a high school senior, world history, ornithology, and badminton enthusiast.
Good afternoon all, my name is Ariana Agron. I am the co-host to SWC. I'm a Latino born and raised in Simpson Park, Brooklyn. As well as being passionate about neuroscience, I am passionate about sports, especially lacrosse, a Native American sport progressively becoming diverse. Guided by my faith, I continue to advocate for my community. As a high school senior, I seek a safe space where I can speak unapologetically about my religious and political views.
Well, thank you for tuning in our very first interview. We're featuring our special guest, Maud Maron. She's running for Congress in New York's 10th District. Maud is a mother of four, advocate, lawyer, and native New Yorker. First of all, it's great to have you in our Sunset Work community today. Before we jump into our questions, we're just glad that you're here. And so tell us, why are you running for Congress?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm really thrilled to be here with both of you, and really thrilled to see young women doing what you're doing, right? Start speaking up for yourselves, but also making your voices heard to a broader community. I think that's really amazing. And in many ways, I'm doing the same thing. I'm speaking up about the issues that are really important to me, and I've been doing that for a lot of years. And that's why I'm running for Congress. I am, as you mentioned, I'm a mom. I'm a mom of four kids, and my eldest is 16 years old. So, very similar age. And I also have a 14-year-old, a 12-year-old, a 6-year-old. So I'm a mom with a lot of kids in New York City public schools. And I got in very active in our school system and trying to make sure that the schools are good and that they're giving kids everything they need. Obviously, you need a good education. You need to read and do math and know how to write and know your history and know your civics. But school is more than that, right? And as you guys are talking about, and as I'm looking forward to talking to you about, school is also about figuring out who you are. And to do that, you need room and space to talk, to try out ideas, to talk about ideas with people. You don't have to agree all the time on everything. Part of growing up and being a New Yorker and being an American is talking about your ideas and being able to think it through, get things wrong sometimes, come up with new and better ideas. And not only do kids need to be able to do that in school, but we, grown-ups, the adults, the citizens of these communities, need to talk about all the important issues that are out there. And as I think we're all going to talk about a little bit, sometimes that's been hard these days, right? To talk about the things that are important to us. So really happy to be here, really excited to be your first guest, and looking forward to this conversation.
Okay, so I will be attending college in the fall of 2023. The goal is to stay within our vibrant, beautiful city to gain a college education. However, one of my biggest concerns is public safety. It is difficult for children and teens to commute to school safely without being placed into dangerous situations. As a congressional member, what would you do to ensure public safety in our streets, subways, and local parks?
Absolutely. This is, first of all, congratulations about the fact that you're going to be a college student, but also this is an issue that affects not just college students, it affects kids even younger. And we know as New Yorkers that the subways are like the school bus for hundreds of thousands of kids in New York City every day. And so they need to be safe, they need to be clean, they need to run on time. What we've seen in our city is a lot of people talking about how the police are bad, the police are racist, the police are terrible. Every profession gets things wrong sometimes, right? And we have a right to demand a really high quality police force, the same way we have the right to demand high quality doctors and teachers, and we want them to do their job, right? But we also have to recognize they do a really important job, and that's an important part of our community. Now, what's happening right now with the NYPD is we're seeing a lot of senior police officers retiring, people leaving the job, right? When you tell people all the time, you're bad, you're racist, you're terrible, you don't do your job well, that doesn't build the morale of a police department. That doesn't make young people want to go into the police department and do that hard job. One of the things that a federal congressional person can do, and we have done in the past, is support the hiring and training of more police officers when you need it. We have a crime spike going on in New York City, and not just New York City, other cities too. Some of the policies that have been really pushed by the far left of my party, of the Democratic Party, have gotten it wrong, right? We were promised that if we arrested fewer people, incarcerated fewer people, didn't set bail, decriminalized drugs, that crime would go down. The opposite has happened. So when we elect leaders at any level, we need to elect them to solve the actual problems we have, not the problems we wish we had, right? The problem is not the police being racist. The problem is not that, we are arresting too many people. The problem is too much crime, and that's the problem we need to solve. So I think we should look back to the days when the federal government gave New York City money to hire additional police officers so we can have police officers in the subway and be well trained, right? I'm not saying the police always get it perfect. They don't. They make mistakes, and we need to have well-trained police officers who know how to de-escalate, who know how to deal with people who have mental illness, but also who know how to do the plain and simple job of arresting the bad guys, because that's an important part of policing. And the federal government can and should absolutely support that right now with funds and with training.
Excellent point, Maud. I'm curious regarding education, critical race theory being taught in schools, as well as political agendas. In other words, ideologies being implemented in public school curriculums. What are your views on that as a parent, as an advocate, as a lawyer?
Right. So this is something that comes up at all levels of our school right now. As I mentioned, I have kids in high school, and middle school, and elementary school. I really strongly and firmly believe that our public schools should be a place of education, not indoctrination. What do I mean by that? You can agree or disagree about, if you give a statement that says America's a racist country, right? We have the New York Times put out something called the 1619 Project a few years ago. It's very thought-provoking and very interesting. That should be presented as an idea that you can either agree with or disagree with, right? It's a very thought-provoking, interesting piece, but it's being taught as if it's fact. And that's not fair to kids, it's not fair to families, it's not fair to people who think differently. So I think it's perfectly fine to introduce ideas, especially for high school kids who are older and who can grapple with important ideas. But I don't think we should teach young kids that America is a bad country. I think America is an amazing country. I'm married to an immigrant. I know your mom came to this country. It's like we are a city of immigrants, and there's a reason for that. So many people want to come here and try to come here and build amazing lives, because this is a country where people can really build better lives than they would have in the country that they left. That's a thing to celebrate. It's an amazing thing. And what I get from a lot of the conversation around, it's a broad topic, CRT, critical race theory, but the through line of those conversations is always very negative about this country and always looking at the worst. There's all sorts of bad chapters in our country, as there are in every country on the planet in all of history and all of time, right? But what I think we've gotten away from, what I got as a young girl, is celebrating how amazing our country is. Understanding the mistakes, but celebrating how amazing it is. And also, I'll just say this, your generation, my kids' generation, is the most fantastically not prejudiced, not racist, not discriminatory generation. In New York City, I feel like it's all these adults who are constantly trying to tell you to look at the kid sitting next to you and focus on their skin color, and you're like, but why? We're friends, we just want to go hang out, right? Like, not that there's no prejudice in the world, there is, but young people really have done an amazing job of sort of moving beyond that kind of that skin color prejudice or being prejudiced against someone because of their religion or their ethnicity or their language, if we would get out of the way with some of this constant focus and let the normal generational diversity that our city's so good at doing, of letting people come to this country and make friends with people who look different from them and who have to, that we're getting in the way of that now, and that's our great strength as a country, and we should get out of the way, stop teaching kids to focus on differences, and let the next generation discover what they're going to contribute to America.
Okay, so the competition amongst other female athletes is fierce. What is your take on the opposite sex playing on female-dominated teams and vice versa? Should the focus be then on creating more co-ed non-competitive teams? Biologically, we are created differently, so what is your take on this matter?
Right. So this one is a really easy one. It's a hot button issue, right, to talk about trans athletes, but it's a really easy one. Men and women are different. Nowhere is it more clear than in sports. There's just tons of research on this. There's no amount that a man can lower his testosterone to turn him into a woman and to make it fair for him to compete on a woman's team. So in our federal government right now, Title IX, which is the law, it's 50 years old, a civil rights law that governs when a federal government gives money to an institution like a university or a school, that institution has to not discriminate on the basis of sex. Other categories as well, but on the basis of sex. And our government right now is trying to include gender identity in that, which would allow a man who identifies as a woman to compete on a woman's team. I think it's wrong, I think it's unfair, and I think the vast majority of Americans, men and women, young people, old people, new Americans, people who have been here for a long time, they agree with me on this. The polling shows that, right, that this is really not controversial. But they've made it so that it's hard to say these simple things that we all know is true. We all know that putting a man on a woman's team is not fair to the women who have worked so hard to compete and to be at that high level.
Our next question. I frankly believe that there's a common misconception going around on the difference between a transphobic versus an individual who's respectful about expressing common sense. And you have recently shared that the Brooklyn Democrats have excluded you from a candidate forum. Why is it that you are a Democrat as most of the other candidates on this race are, but this lack of inclusion doesn't reflect on the notion of democracy? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's pretty funny that the crowd that talks about inclusion the most is the one that wants to exclude people who don't think all the same things they think, say all the same things they say. Because if you want to be inclusive, truly, you have to talk to people who don't agree with you. I always do. I'm happy to talk to people who disagree with me, who agree with me, who are still figuring out these issues. Especially young people sometimes, right? I talk to my kids' friends and people. I find that especially around this, the reason that the Brooklyn Club said we don't want you here is because of my positions around Title IX, about making single-sex sports based on biological sex and not gender identity. I find that young people struggle with figuring this out because there's a real impulse to be kind and to be inclusive and to not want to chase someone out of a space, and I think that's a great thing. I think it's something to celebrate. But there are important issues here that you have to think through, and if you say a man can compete on a woman's team, you're chasing a woman out of that spot who would otherwise be there. So in your effort to be inclusive, you have to realize that you're shifting who gets excluded to another group of people. And so I think that requires thoughtful, real conversation where people have to sit down and discuss it with each other. So it's getting our democracy wrong when you say, I'm only going to talk to you if you agree with me. I won't even have the conversation with you unless you agree with me. Democracies don't function like that. We don't make our community stronger and better that way. We absolutely have to talk to people we don't agree with and do so respectfully. I sometimes change my mind. If someone comes to me with a better idea or explains something I didn't know, there's no shame in changing your mind, and it's okay to listen to somebody and be like, no, I still think what I thought before, but it was nice to talk to you.
So, Maud, how would you simplify the inflation crisis we are currently experiencing so I could share with others? We want to ensure that future generations have an economically stable country.
Absolutely. Look, inflation hits families the hardest, right? It's very regressive. I mean, if you're rich enough that it doesn't matter if your grocery bill doubles, then it's not hurting you as much. But if you're a family and you're trying to put food on the table for your kids, and a double grocery bill week after week, month after month, really starts to hit home. You know, economists who have studied these issues for years and who know a whole lot about things can't tell you exactly why we have inflation. But there is a general consensus about the amount of money that we've spent in the last 2 years. We've passed these two big bills, COVID Recovery Act and American Recovery Act, that are very likely a driver of inflation. We have to stop printing money to solve problems. All of our problems are not going to be solved by just spending more money. And we need to understand that when you give away money to people, it seems nice, like, oh, the federal government just gave me a check, here's this money. But they're actually taking money from you if that check actually causes the inflation that makes your dollars worth less. Your dollars have to go further. They have to put roof over your head, they have to buy you food, they have to put gas in your car so that you can get to work. And one of the most important things we can do is say, that may sound nice to spend all that money on that program, but it's actually going to take dollars out of people's pockets if we keep spending money like that, and we have to stop doing that, because American workers need to earn their money, earn their dollars, and have those dollars go far enough for them to be able to afford their house, their food, their gasoline.
Very well said. Before we go on to our last question, I wanted to add that we would love to have you again as a special, guest, potentially in the future, because your bright leadership is so inspiring. Also because there's a lot of issues in the community that need to be addressed with ideas. But yeah, tell us any words you have for the Sunset Park community or beyond the community that about why people should support you.
Absolutely. Well, I love Sunset Park, and and in part it's because there are so many immigrants in this community, and our immigrant communities make our city great. And one of the things I love about immigrant communities all over New York, Chinese communities, Hispanic communities, Eastern European communities, is that what I find again and again and again when I talk to immigrants, including my husband, but when I talk to people when I'm out canvassing, is people who love this country and know that it's an amazing country. And that should be something all Americans know, but sometimes people who have been here for a lot of generations forget it a little bit. And I think it's really important to know how lucky we are to have a thriving and vibrant democracy, because when you look around the world and see how few people live in democracy, you realize that not only are we lucky, but we have to do the hard work of protecting our democracy, of making it stronger, of making it more responsive to people. And one of the reasons I want to go to Congress is because I think the New York congressional delegation has to be filled with Congress people who understand our communities, who understand what we want, and who understand that we want safe streets, we want safe subways, we want good jobs, we want affordable housing so that people can take care of their families. And that requires really investing in our country and investing in our democracy, and not constantly pretending like we're a terrible country or a terrible place. We can fix the real problems without pretending like we're the worst country in the world. Far from it. We're all really lucky to be here, and we have an important job to do to make our country a really strong, successful democracy. And I will say this, it makes me feel so hopeful to talk to both of you and to see the questions you've asked and the work you're doing here in your community. So it's really wonderful, and I congratulate you both.
Well said, thank you. Maud Maron, thank you for your time. We are hoping that you represent Sunset Park. We love having you today. Thank you so much.
Thank you both so much.
Yeah, thank you again, Maud. It really means a lot to us launching this initiative that we have, our project. As recently mentioned, your phenomenal leadership and story reflects the strong potential you have as an advocate for your family's values, for our values. Community, the August primaries are right next door, so early voting starts on Saturday, August 13th, all the way to August 21st. and the primary elections are on Tuesday, August 23rd. This is Brittany and Ariana reporting from Sunset Park, Brooklyn for SWC. Thanks again for joining us and stay tuned.
Please follow us on Instagram and Twitter. Our Instagram is speakingwithout.censorship. Our Twitter is at SWC_official22. Thank you.
Thank you.